Hi, it's Christine Daigle.
I'm Jenna Brown.
I'm Kevin Tumlinson.
And I'm JD Barker. Welcome to Writers Inc. So I don't normally watch the news, and I got an email from my film agent out in California, and he kind of tipped me off as to what's going on. Holy
Yeah,
hell! Like
yeah,
Yeah.
literally.
yeah, like
Yeah,
that is crazy. I can't even imagine living through that or dealing with that. So like thoughts and prayers to absolutely everybody out there.
Yeah, it's pretty
Hopefully it
bad.
winds down in the next couple of days. It sounds like today it's slowing down a little bit, but it's bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Just
yeah,
hoping
those
everyone is
winds,
evacuated and safe. Yeah.
those Santa Ana winds are brutal.
yeah, yeah. I've been checking in with friends, hearing from some of the people I know who live in the area, and a lot of them have had to evacuate. So I mean, it's pretty serious, pretty bad.
Yeah.
Well,
One
that
of
would
my,
be, I mean, imagine like you're in a hotel somewhere, you've got no eyes on your house, you don't really know what's going
Yeah,
on, and like you can't get back in to check, so
right.
like you're just sitting there in this limbo. I read some stories last night, like people were basically learning that their house was burning down because like they got an alert on their phone from their fire alarm or something in their house.
Yeah.
It's like little things tipping them off, but the power is probably going out too, so like those kind of things probably don't even work in a lot of places.
Well, yeah, and exacerbating the whole thing is that, for years, insurance companies have been pulling out of California, dropping
Yeah.
policies and things like that. So a lot of people no longer have fire insurance, and so they're losing everything, and they're not going to get it back because there's no insurance.
I never
So
understood about insurance is like, even if you have fire insurance, like when you have these huge devastating events, they can claim act of God in some of them. At least that's what they've done on the East
Well, it's
Coast
just
with
like,
like,
yeah. So, like here in well, not here. Well, when I was living in the Gulf Coast region, so you could have flood insurance, but it wouldn't cover flood from, say, a storm, right? So, there's
right. It's
specific
weird.
insurance that covers it's a specific policy that covers and if you don't ask for it and don't get this specific policy that covers storm damage, then you're out of luck. So, your regular flood policy would say, oh, it's an act of God. So you can get fire insurance the same way. If you can get insurance against the probability of a forest fire or something burning your house down. So,
Hmm.
but if you didn't think to do that, if you thought, oh, there's a fire policy on my insurance, then
Yeah.
you're kind of screwed. But the insurance industry itself has been pulling out of California for years because of, and I don't know all the specifics, but I know that California does not make things easy on these guys, and it's become too expensive for them to keep covering people, and so rather than fight the state government, they just cancel policies and move out. So that's been happening a
We've
lot.
We've got a similar problem down in Florida. We've got a property down there and it's right on the water. And it's basically, it's so expensive to insure that we just don't insure it. Like we roll the dice on it. But it got hit in that Sanibel hurricane.
Yeah,
And like, so now we're paying the price of that. But, a lot of people in that area, like if you own the property for cash and, in these kind of neighborhoods, a lot of these people do, they don't carry insurance.
yeah,
Because they figure the house has been there for 40, 50 years. It's not going anywhere. It takes like a lightning strike, like the odds of something bad happening are
Hmm.
slim to none. That's how you rationalize it anyway. And, before you know it, you're watching the news and, and this is going on. So
yeah,
horrible stuff. Speaking of horrible stuff, TikTok tomorrow, Supreme Court. It's their
yeah.
final appeal. Do we want to take bets on where this goes?
It'll still be here. It's
You
not
think
going
it's
anywhere.
you think so?
Yeah.
Yeah. There'll be some sort of last second Hail Mary that rescues it. Someone will say, "Let's do this. Let's sign this. We'll waive it for 90 days or whatever." But I'm still kind of rooting for Kevin O'Leary to buy it. I think
He's
that would be
he's
the best thing.
trying. But
Yeah.
they're not selling. Like I mean, he's
No,
he's
I
all
know.
over the place telling people he's going to buy it, but like as far as I know, they're not selling. I honestly think the government is just going through the motions right now,
I do too.
because they set this date of the 19th. That was very intentional the day before Trump takes office. Trump, like he didn't like TikTok before. He, fell in love with it when it helped him win the election. So he made some
Right.
promises to keep it around. So I think like he basically he had a meeting with the president of TikTok. I think he spurred the Supreme Court to take this on. But I mean, if you think this through, like the Supreme Court, like this was a bill that was passed, on a nonpartisan basis, across the board. The Supreme Court would have to overturn that in order for TikTok to stay around. And like, I can't, like, they're gonna, they're gonna ignore the fact that this is TikTok. They're gonna look at, like, do we really want to overturn a nonpartisan bill? And based on First Amendment rights, which I think is kind of a weak argument in this case, just because there's a million other social media platforms. I don't know. I really feel like the Supreme Court is going to look at this tomorrow. They're going to rule on it tomorrow.
Yeah.
And the 19th deadline is probably going to still stick. And then a lot of people are going to be playing with VPNs trying to figure out how to keep it going a week later.
Are they hearing oral arguments, or is it just the written arguments and they're essentially going to just make a decision tomorrow? Do you know?
No, they're hearing oral. All the written stuff is all in, and you can read it all online if you want to go through it.
Yeah, I've
But
read all
they said
that.
that they're gonna rule on it almost immediately, which is unheard of too. And like the
Yeah.
fact that they stuck it in there, they said they were going to do this, and they're going to rule on it before
Right.
the 19th. To me, it just feels like a lot of people are just just putting on a little bit of a show, but nothing's actually going to change. But who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It'll be very interesting to hear the arguments and the questions that the justices ask. I always think those are fascinating to listen to.
Yeah. And I guess to everyone listening, you'll know whether I was right or wrong because
Yeah.
it will have
Yeah.
already happened. So
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll probably know by the time this airs.
I was talking to my teenage nieces when I was on the winter break about where they're gonna go if TikTok goes, and I'm like, oh, I heard about this lemonade, and it was pretty much a thumbs down across the board. It's too much like Instagram. It's not TikTok. So it'll be interesting
Well,
to see if it goes away where people end up.
Lemonade is owned by ByteDance, so it's going to go away right along with TikTok.
It'll go too. There you go.
what happened to Vines?
I
Vines
don't
was like
know. Oh, Vines, I remember that.
Yeah.
Like
yeah,
it was like the 10, 15-second clips and
yeah,
I don't know.
yeah.
What
Vines can
happened
make
to
a comeback.
writing letters? Let's just go back to writing letters.
I am in favor of more writing and reading. That is definitely, I'd rather we do that than watch people dancing or eating Tide Pods or whatever on TikTok. So,
All right. Well, what is going on in the news?
well, speaking of Tide Pods, that has nothing at all to do with this story. A free alternative to Google Docs. For writers who like to collaborate on documents but would rather not use Google Docs, there is Etherpad. It's an open source app that provides collaborative editing in real time for Windows, Mac, and Linux. There are many publicly available servers, or you can set up your own, quote, instance. Now, what I didn't see was whether this worked on mobile, which I would require, but sounds interesting.
Yeah.
Let's
Has
check it
anyone
out.
tried it yet?
I didn't download it. I don't want to download it yet, but I was looking through their site and looking at the videos and stuff. And I mean, it has that feel of like Google Docs is collaboration or whatever, but I don't know. I don't object to Google so much that I would just go download a random thing I heard about and use it. And I don't do collaborative
Just,
writing that much anyway.
just remember, kids, if it's free, you're the product.
Well, that is true. But
Well,
Google
the
is also
privacy was
free,
the thing that
so
was more
The more you
interesting
know.
to me. Like you can make your own thing, and I wonder how they collect data on that versus Google, which was my only interest in it. Was I don't know, is it more private? I
yeah.
still haven't tried to see if I could write a horrible Google Doc that would get me banned from Google Docs yet, but when I'm
Don't
not
do
using
it.
it, I might.
Don't do it.
Do you guys do
I mean,
things like this? Do you do collaborative writing live with each other? Or, I
I
mean,
use
not. I mean,
Google Docs at work, but I don't know. I think I've had some like writer friends who use it, but I prefer Word. I think it I don't know. I like Word. I don't really particularly enjoy Google Docs.
Christine and I have been using it for the Flatliners project, but I got to admit, on my side, I'm still doing all my writing in Scrivener, and then I'm just copying and pasting it to the Google Doc.
Right.
And
I'm
I'm
doing
keeping
mine
both
in Word
copies.
and yeah.
Yeah, like I can't write in that interface, and like I need to see the rest of the book and like everything. I'm so used to the way that it's organized in there. I mean, if there's a downside to this, like with Google Docs isn't going anywhere, which I think is
Yeah.
one of the other reasons people will use it. And like a fly by night company or somebody just starting up with something like this, it could be gone in another week. My biggest issue with these kind of things is whether or not they sync properly. If you
Yeah.
type in one device, like, is it going to sync across the board everywhere else? Or you can end up with these, synchronization errors where you've got to pick one version over another. Like those kind of things drive me insane.
Everything I've seen showed it doing live updating though. They even had two people typing at the same time in the document, which was
Were,
I
were
don't
these
think you could.
videos put out by the company, or were these actual
Yeah,
users?
this was on the company's website, so yeah. But I've played around some with Google, not the word processor, but like their spreadsheet thing, Sheets, I think. And I've been editing that with like a coworker or something, and it does it live. So, you're seeing the changes. Actually, Christine and I have actually accidentally done that on our document, the schedule document we have for Writers Inc. So you see those updates as they happen live.
Yeah, that's true.
I just don't have any instance in which I really need to do that with writing. Because I wouldn't want to sit there writing with someone watching it because it's not, I don't know. I do a lot of starts and stops and looping back and, change this, change that. I think it would be a nightmare. No. All
Yeah,
right.
it's whatever.
Speaking of Jenna Bush Hager launches imprint with Random House. Jenna Bush Hager's media company, Thousand Voices, has partnered with Random House Publishing Group to publish emerging authors across the group's imprints. Jenna, head of the man, that one made me stumble. Let me start that again. Jenna, head of the Read with Jenna book club, will be involved in the acquisition, cover design, marketing, and sales plan, and she will participate in the book's promotion through joint appearances, partnerships, and publicity. The imprint is completely separate from her book club. They will not be book club choices, it says. United Talent Agency represented Bush Hager and her company and will offer strategic support for the venture. Previously, Thousand Voices has optioned film and TV rights to at least 9 books. Way to go, Jenna.
Thanks. I'm so excited for the Jennas of the world, and I hope that she gives preference to authors named Jenna because I feel like that just is such a nice, cohesive fit.
It's a victory for Jennas everywhere.
It really is. I'm very excited. I actually think this is a really interesting idea because she has that, the book club, but now, like, it's not exactly an imprint. She's working like the debut title is actually being published through Ballantine, so she's gonna shape a bunch of genres across
Yeah.
different imprints, which is really sort of interesting. I'm
Very
excited to
cool.
see where this goes for
Me
Jennas
too.
everywhere.
She's got a huge following on the book club side, and
Yeah.
like that's a powerhouse for those people that have that particular voice, so they could push these titles. I mean, we saw it initially. I think Oprah was probably the first one to come up with the book club kind of deal, and just show what kind of movement they could create in the publishing industry.
Yeah.
So like this is just an extension of that. I think it's just taking it into the 21st century.
Yeah,
Yeah.
shaping it more on the pre-publication rather than the post-publication where you just choose a book for the book club. Like she's actually gonna usher in titles.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
thought that was really interesting because her following is huge. Like you said, she's like an Oprah pick or a Reese Witherspoon pick. She's on that level. And now to be actually involved in the publishing, it's novel. Like I don't think I've seen that before. So it'll be really interesting to see what
Yeah.
Yeah,
happens with her imprint. Yeah.
I'll even
Sarah,
forgive her for her extra N. It's, it's
Yeah.
fine.
Sarah Jessica Parker is another one. She's just an actress who has this huge
Yeah.
book club following that could easily step into something like this too.
Yeah. Well, speaking of extra ends, Fable app generated bigoted reader summaries. See what I did there?
I
Social book tracking app Fable came under fire for the offensive year-end reader summaries, which were generated by AI. Fable replied to users online with apologies for the content, noting that our reader summaries are intended to both capture your reading history and playfully roast your taste, but they should never ever include references to race, sexuality, religion, nationality, or other protected classes. Fable has removed all AI features and submitted a new version to app stores. In an Instagram post, Fable head of product Chris Galello said the company would introduce safeguards. These included disclosures that summaries were generated by artificial intelligence, the ability to opt out of them, and a thumbs down button that would alert the app to a potential problem. So, who could have predicted this coming?
yeah,
You think a human would kind of follow behind and just do a little bit of reading and editing before they hit the publish button on it.
Yeah.
Did you see some of those things? Like
I did. They
those
were wild.
choices.
Wild.
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
it was
Please.
like, we notice you're reading a lot of Black authors. Maybe try some white authors. And I'm just like, oh my gosh. Like, they were
cis
so
men.
bad.
It was like, yeah, maybe try the occasional white cis man. You're like,
I'm
oh,
like, oh.
okay.
Yeah, it was horrible. I'm surprised. I'm just
Yeah.
gonna leave it. So yeah, I don't know. That was really bad, and I guess
It's
they're
very
trying to
uncomfortable
ramp
for
up. We'll
everyone
see.
involved.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't use it for a whole lot of stuff, but like I've been doing this countdown, to the TikTok thing. So I've been creating tombstones using ChatGPT.
Yeah.
My prompt is create a tombstone that has TikTok and the number, like 13 on it or whatever we are on the countdown. So it's a real simple prompt, and I just plug it in there, and it never gets it right. Like it always like the number is different. It'll put like instead of 13, it'll put like 13-8 or something, but like it always tweaks it, and I have to type in that same prompt like 4 or 5 times before I actually get something that simple. It's like if it can't create an image from a 1-sentence prompt, imagine what it's doing when it's trying to put a cohesive thought together.
Yeah.
Jenna
Yeah.
sent me a really interesting article that AIs can get dementia. So if you're not on the
Yeah.
back end, like constantly updating them, they degrade and start doing wild things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So I did this thing where I don't want to give too much of it away, but there is an AI that I used to generate some audio about my books, and I was listening back to it, and it like just started randomly inserting characters and events and things that were nowhere in that book, and but I decided to leave it all there because I think it's kind of funny. It made it sound. I'm not trying to fool anybody into thinking these are real people talking or anything, but it made it sound more authentic that they got details wrong. They had some really interesting insights into the book itself, though. I mean, that was pretty cool.
I wonder if there's a way to purchase product placement in responses. It's like actually dictate what, like have it mention your book, or, like buy Kentucky Fried Chicken, like in the middle of a response
That's
to
funny.
some other.
Yeah. The real
That's
fun is
probably
when the AI voices will sometimes go like ridiculous with like it'll be reading along and it'll be like, social book tracking apps, Fable, and then it'll go like crazy. So anyway, well, that's the news for this week. This week's episode is sponsored by Reedsy. If you're planning to write a book in 2025, Reedsy's 3-month novel writing course can help. We often set New Year's resolutions with the best of intentions, but without an actionable plan. When you join Reedsy's How to Write a Novel course, you'll get the structure and accountability you need to actually finish your draft. Each week you'll get videos that teach you about writing craft, live master classes with your instructor and guest authors, plus feedback and access to a supportive community of writers to help you stay on track. Dive into topics like character building, plot skills, dialogue, soggy middles, and other magic ingredients that make your character's narrative come alive. To find out more about the How to Write a Novel course, head to reedsy.com/learning. Registrations are now open for the next cohort start on March 3rd, but be quick as spaces are limited. Use coupon code WritersInc at checkout for 10% off the tuition fee. Check out this course now and you could tick write a book off of your bucket list by spring.
I've got additional news. Christine is muted.
I can't unmute myself. Okay,
There she
JD,
is.
who is up this week?
This week we've got PC Cast coming on. She's a #1 New York Times bestseller, former member of the U.S. Air Force, and she even taught high school for 15 years. Her latest novel is called Boudica, a sexy action-packed historical romance novel releasing at the end of the month. PC Cast.
Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm so happy to be here. I love you guys.
Yeah, I'm very excited to talk about ancient Rome. But before we go there, let's start at the beginning, as stories always do. What started you writing? How did you get started down this path?
Oh my God, what started me writing? Let's see. In first grade, I wrote my first book titled Blubby the Blue Whale. It was about a suspiciously Phyllis-like, that's my first name, Phyllis, a suspiciously Phyllis-like little girl in first grade who rode a flying whale around the world. It did not get published yet, but that was, but I literally cannot remember a time when I couldn't read and write. I've been writing stories, literally writing them down since I was in first grade. When I was in like 7th grade, I wanted to write a Harlequin Presents book, or whatever the Harlequin medical line was. I can't remember. Anyway, it was about, the title was Nurse Janice, and I wrote it on a manual typewriter. Even though I am old, I'm not that old. I just happened to only have access to an old manual typewriter. And I could not figure out how to move Nurse Janice from one scene to another. So I gave up for a while.
It's a very problem.
It was a problem. It was a problem. I was like, okay, end of scene. Now, how does she move to the next scene? So I did eventually figure that out, and was in the Air Force, traveled a lot, did a lot of different things, put myself through college as a single parent of the lovely Kristen Francis Cast. And then I was teaching in Oklahoma at the same high school my dad taught at, and my daughter attended. And I started writing again because I was in an absolutely miserable marriage. And as we all know, public school teachers don't get paid enough to live, especially Oklahoma public school teachers. So I started writing. I always believed I'd be a novelist. I always believed that. But I didn't really understand how to get there. So first I started doing a bunch of research, and then I started writing, and I took a creative writing class, a college level creative writing class. I audited it because I already had my degree, and it was taught by a wonderful woman named Teresa Miller, who was a professor for OSU Tulsa, and she was also executive director of Oklahoma Poets and Writers Association.
Oh, nice.
And yes, and I pretended like she was my editor. And every week when I went in, I gave myself deadlines, and it was a week deadline. And I didn't have to follow the school, her lesson plan. I talked to her beforehand, and I said, I want to finish this manuscript. And she said, fine, well, you can use the lessons if you want, and I'll just going to serve as your like editor. And so I finished my first book, the first semester I audited with her. And my second book, the second semester I audited with her. She tells people that I couldn't pass. So I kept taking the class again and again. But she introduced me to a small press, the owner of a small press. And the first manuscript that I finished, which eventually became Divine by Mistake, was published then for a whopping advance of $250.
Wow.
Right?
Living the life.
And that, right, I was flush with cash. And, but that book surprisingly won a bunch of national awards, and got a bunch of, like, Romantic Times, remember when the magazine used to be a big thing?
Yeah.
And they'd give like 5-star gold, and they almost never gave them. Goddess by Mistake got one. And I used that interest in that book and the reactions to that book to snag a literary agent in New York. And then it went from there. Then she sold within 1 week of me signing with her, she sold my first trilogy to Berkeley. It wasn't really a trilogy. It's the Goddess Summoning books. You don't have to read them in order. But and that was it. I've been writing ever since.
Took off from there. Wow, that's a really impressive story to go from auditing a class to writing an award-winning book that snagged you an agent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was in 2000, right around 2000.
Oh, nice. Yeah, it's sad that the Romantic Times isn't I don't think they do.
No, I don't think so. No, and I also miss their cons, the Romantic Times convention, where the male cover models would prance about in wearing feathers and a couple leaves for the whole convention. It was a blast.
I went to one of their last ones happened to be in Las Vegas, and I honestly had no idea what I was signing up for.
Yeah, no, you don't. You have, but they're a blast. They were so much fun. They were so
My
much fun.
husband, like every day, I was just like bringing home like these like tote full of, more books than I've ever, at one time. And he was just like, "What is going on?" And I was like, "I don't know."
Yeah, they were awesome. Yeah, it was fun.
They were a lot of fun.
Actually, I think I was at that one too. It was in the early 2000s, early to mid 2000s, maybe
15 or so. I think
I might have been. I think I was there. I think Kristen and I wrote. I think we finished The Scent of Salt and Sand was the first time we'd actually co-written together, because I wrote all the House of Night books and she was my teen voice editor. The first book and it was a novella that we actually co-wrote, was The Scent of Salt and Sand. And I think we finished it in Vegas in a suite at the Bellagio in Vegas during that RWA or RT thing.
Right. Yeah. Well, very nice. Well, there's worse places to finish a novel than the Bellagio. It's a very lovely casino.
It sure is.
So you've been at this for a long time. What is your writing process like? Are you a plotter? Do you just sort of write by instinct? Has it changed over the years?
It has definitely changed over the years. Even when I was writing House of Night, I didn't plot. I just had an idea I usually had an idea, and I still usually get the beginning of a book or a series and the end. And then I see flashes of scenes between the two.
Mm-hmm.
And I start writing and connect the dots somehow. As I have been published longer and written, a lot more books and become more experienced, and I have more writing tools, I have realized that actually plotting a book is a good idea. It leads to less plot. It leads to less, why did I write myself into that plot corner? Instances. It started with Kristen and I when we really started writing together. We really hit our stride right around the Sisters of Salem trilogy, and realized that not only did we have to do intricate plotting and outlining, but we literally, when she and I write together, we outline chapter by chapter. We divide the characters up, and whoever's character is forefront in a chapter writes that chapter. And we literally write that down. We'll put like Ren is the character I wrote in the duology, Draw Down the Moon and Give Up the Night. And Lee was Kristen's character. And so we would write and Kristen is really, really good at outlining. I am really not good at outlining. So she took the lead. She has graphs. She has all this cool stuff. And it would literally say Lee, and then it'd say what day it was, what time of day it was, and then bullet points of what has to happen in that chapter. And even as much as we'd even write dialogue in the bullet points, stuff to remind us. Now, when I write by myself, I don't, that hurts my head. Okay. Kristen makes me do that, but when I'm by myself writing, what I do is I write myself a letter. I just sit down and I start writing what I want to happen in the book. and who should do what and where. And I like to divide it up into 3 acts and focus on what actions in each act and beats and all that kind of stuff and, you know, timing. But I do now write myself a letter and I know where I'm going because it's too scary to not know where you're going. Especially like I can't, when I look back on House of Night, all those books, there are 12 original books, 4 novellas, and then 4 big book spinoffs. I literally only plotted the last 4 books and some of the novellas. The rest of it, I just knew where the series started and I knew where I wanted it to end up. And then I just made a bunch of shit up.
Well, sometimes that's how you have to go. But I have also learned that, yeah, those why did I do this moment would be very demoralizing. So yeah, having at least a map, even if it's, you know, it sort of has some holes in it and you got to like squint from a distance to see it, but at least somewhat of a map is always more helpful than just, all right, I'm off.
Okay. Yeah.
Wish me
Especially
luck.
when you're writing a series. If it's just a standalone or a duology, I can be kind of looser about that, unless it's something like Boudica. And when it's like historical fantasy, I intricately plotted Boudica. I knew what would happen Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. And the next book in this Queen series, although they're not connected at all, I've just turned in and I had to intricately plot Act 1, Act 2, Act 3 of that too. It's just, and so much research. It's just different than writing something that's non-historical.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine. Yeah, and we will get to Boudica in in just a moment. Yeah. So, you know, do you write every day? Do you have a writing schedule? Is there like anything that you know, works for you when you're in that writing mode?
Yeah, I have written on a tread desk since 2008. I've been walking and writing. That I found not only does that help my body because my shoulders, you guys know, if you write, your shoulders hurt, your back hurts, your butt hurts, your legs hurt, your knees hurt. And also I found that I'm much more productive when I move. I mean, think about this, like when you're writing, or even when you're like even writing a letter or something, and or an email, and you're like, oh, I can't think of how that should go. What do? You usually get up, go in and get some tea, you know, load the dishwasher, unload the dishwasher, wash the cat, whatever. And all of a sudden you're like, oh shit, that's it. I got it. That's what happens when you walk and write. When you get a tread desk, you don't have to stop. It affects your brain in a different way and really enhances creativity and also problem solving. It's really good. So I've been writing on a tread desk since 2008. I write at night. I usually start writing between 8 and 9 p.m. and I stop writing anywhere from midnight to when the sun comes up. And it all depends on where I am in a manuscript. Towards the end, I write for hours and hours and hours, and I'll just decide, okay, I'm going to finish this book this weekend and take very few breaks. And the closer to the end to a book I am, the faster I am. At the beginning, I will struggle for 4 hours to write between 5 and 10 pages and not do it every day and have to make copious notes to myself in the middle of the night. I wake up and make notes because I'm dreaming it. I don't know if it's not really a dream. It's like between awake and asleep, I fix plot problems, and I have forced myself to wake up and write them down in journals that I keep next to my bed. And I always have a Himalayan salt lamp on my bedside table, so I don't have to, it's like I don't really wake up. I just make copious notes and then go right back to sleep. And so I write at night, and at first it's very slow and it's not every day. When I hit a midway point, usually it's around, page 200, 250-ish. And my books usually run between 100,000. My alone books usually run between 100,000 and 170 or so thousand words. Boudica was around 160 something thousand words, I think. But when I'm in the middle, it's like riding a roller coaster, and you're like, click, 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 click to the top. And then when you hit that place, it just goes boom, for me. And then I feel when I'm writing, I feel exactly like you feel when you're reading an awesome book.
Mhm.
No, and you're completely immersed in the book world and you think you're going to turn the corner and run into a dragon. That's how I feel when I'm writing. So you not wanting to leave your book alone and not read it is how I feel about writing from about the middle to the end of all of my books. And I can't stay away. So I'm very, very fast and very productive then. It's the whole first part that's like, is it ever going to get to that place? And then my internal editor's like, no, you're a fraud.
Right.
You've only written 50 or so books. You'll never write another. And I'm always like,
Right.
shut up, bitch. Okay. And I have learned to just shut her up and just the only way to shut her up is keep writing. And that's also a really good trick for novice writers. Your internal editor is going to shriek at you that you can't do it, that you're not good enough. No one's going to read it. No one's going to want it. Who do you think you are? The only way to shut her up is to write. Just keep writing right through it. Tell her, I just wrote 2 paragraphs and you said I'd never write again. And then just keep going.
What did I hear? I couldn't even tell you where, but it stuck with me and it really helps in those moments where it was just give yourself permission to do it badly. And
Yeah.
so that's always helped me where it's just like, oh, what is this? And then it's like, well, who cares? Like, who cares? Just who cares if it's complete trash? Just write it and let it go and see what happens.
Anne Lamont's awesome book on writing called Bird by Bird.
Yeah.
She has an entire chapter that's called Shitty First Drafts.
Yeah.
And
Maybe
that's just it.
there, but yeah, it's
You have to think about like you cannot fix it if it's not down. If you don't get it out of your head, you cannot fix it. And you cannot just sit there and think, oh, I have to find the perfect name for this character or else I can't write it. No. And this is something that my daughter forced me to understand. I used to procrastinate like that. No, I haven't found the perfect name. No, and I quit with I haven't found a perfect title after being published for just a short time because, if you're traditionally published, that they will change your title probably 90% of the time. So just ignore that. But I used to have all the names, everything correct as I was writing it. And Kristen was like, no, literally just put redhead instead, or, RH, or, WOC, a woman of color. Now I'm going to figure out a name later. And that just keep moving forward. The important part about writing is moving forward and understanding that writing is rewriting.
I send out, I will tap in other people. So I will alternate who I ask, but I'll just be like, I need a name of a character. They're feisty or whatever. And I'll just ask different people. And then they have so much fun. They're like, oh, and they'll pick the name and that's the name. And I just go with it like that. And I think that's kind of fun.
I also have a group of girlfriends that I tap into and be like, may I bring over a bottle of wine and let's talk about this book I have in my head. And and a lot of my girlfriends are artists and visual artists, not author artists. And they're like, yeah, this is fun. So then we just drink and brainstorm. And Kristen and I brainstorm really well together too. I love to brainstorm. Brainstorming is like one of my favorite parts.
Oh, me too. I love it so much. A lot of my writing friends have already known, like if they need to brainstorm, I'm the girl to call because, I love it. Hey, where are we? What world are we in? What are we dealing with? What are the problems? Throw them at me.
Tell me. Okay. Yes, I can figure this out.
Yeah. Well, and it's a lot of fun. It's like, it's like playing the what if game. Like, all right,
yeah, it is.
what if they did this? And they're like, well, that doesn't work because the end has to be this. Oh, okay. Like,
okay. So what if this, And Kristen and I are really good at it together, really good at it for both of us. I mean, she'll call me and she'll be in despair. She'll be like, I cannot figure out how to make this carriage wreck and then save whoever and whatever. And I'm like, oh my God, this is real easy. And then I tell her and she's like, oh yeah. Okay, thank you. And usually with me, it's me calling her and being like, or going to her house and being like, God, So I have to do this, I cannot figure out. And she's always like, simplify. You're throwing too much at this.
Yeah.
Just take this, and this out, and then kill that character. I'm like, oh, you're right. That will work perfectly.
I think it's that, just a little bit of a different perspective, because you just get like so mired in the details, and you're just like, well, no, I have to like show this one very specific niche detail of this world in a very big way. And they're like, no, you don't. That doesn't
No, you
make
don't. No.
But
My
it's funny, like,
my
oh,
first editor was Christine Zika for Berkeley. And I still call her, she and I are very close friends, and I still call her my goddess editor. But she used to tell me all the time, one of her biggest pieces of advice was always like, you need to simplify. Simplify.
Yeah.
You are loading too much in there. Pull out half of what you're thinking right now. And it would always work. And I'd be like, oh, okay. Yeah, it's so simple. But when you're in it, it's like, oh, I can't figure it out. But
right.
no matter how many you've written, it's still like, wait, what have I written myself into?
Yeah. I think that's probably very common. So
Yeah.
speaking of writing yourself into a corner, why Rome? Where did the
Oh, it's
idea
not Rome. It's Great Britain. It's ancient Britain.
Great Britain, ancient Great Britain with the Romans?
The Romans invaded Britain several times. First was about 40 CE, the first major one. I think that was Julius Caesar then.
Yeah.
I don't have my notes in front of me, so, but,
No,
and
that's okay.
then around 60, Boudica takes place between 60 and 61 CE. And the Romans have invaded and are occupying Britain, ancient Britain. And ancient Britain was divided up into many, many, many different tribes who we call the Celts now. They did not call themselves the Celts then, they were just Britons. And Boudica's story is she was married to the chief of the Iceni tribe. Think about a map of Great Britain. Think on your head where London is. Go north. And go north-ish. And that's where the Iceni tribe was.
Okay.
There's a map in the book. Okay.
Perfect.
There's a map in the book. So that is where the Iceni tribe was. And Boudica's husband was the chief. He dies unexpectedly, and he leaves half of the tribe to the ruling of the tribe, half of it to his wife, Boudica, as trustee for their two daughters who were very young. We think probably, I made them like, what did I make them? 12 and 9 or something. And they were going to take over leadership of the tribe, be a queen of the tribe when they came of age. The Celts did not, the great ancient Iron Age Britons were more matriarchal than patriarchal. And so Boudica's ruling this tribe, for her young daughters, and a Roman tax collector came to get their percentage. They were going to take their percentage of the taxes, and we know how patriarchal the Romans were.
Yes.
And they were completely like, what the hell? A woman's going to lead a tribe? That is not possible, because we should have our feet on all of their necks. So they thought they would teach Boudica a lesson, and they whipped her, tied her to a post and whipped her in front of her tribe. And the soldiers raped her two young daughters and thought that would then teach her a lesson. Well, what it did was pissed her off. And she was the only person to unite the tribes of Britain at that time. She amassed an army of over 250,000 Celts and came there. She burned all 3 of the Roman major settlements, including London, to the ground, and almost pushed them out of Great Britain. And it's her story that I am honored to tell.
Yeah, it's I didn't realize how true it was as I was reading it. But like most book people, you think like, oh, is this real? And so then you hop onto the old Google and you realize that it is, and it's such
It
a,
is.
it's such a profound story. How important was it for you to stay true to the history, particularly if it's a very ancient history? So there's a couple different versions of this history out there. And how much research did you have to do to do Boudica the honor you wanted?
Well, a lot of research. I have hired a research assistant too, for all of these Queen's books I'm writing, ancient Queen's books I'm writing. It was very important for me to stay historically as historically correct as I could. There are several problems with that. It was, set at 60 CE, and there was the ancient Britons did not have a written language. There were signs and symbols. There were things that the Druids used, but they had no written language. It was all oral. So, but the Roman and Greek historians from that time, they were obsessed with Boudica. So they were also highly biased, and it's all from men's point of view. I mean, they were so obsessed with her. Some of them were like, you'd read it, I mean, you could hear them panting, it was like, they just, they could not believe that a woman could lead, especially all these warriors. And she fought too, of course. The Celts fought with men and women together. And that it just, so there's a lot of record of her. There are even records of her speeches, descriptions of her, but they're all from a very, very biased patriarchal view, not just because the men writing it believe that women were not really even human beings, but also because they looked down on the Britons so much. They thought they were barbarians, and, they didn't understand their language, and they thought they worshiped ridiculous gods. There's a couple particular scenes in the book in the first city that Boudica razzes, and she goes in to see that the Romans have literally taken statues of their deities and Romanized them, turned them into their deities. Like Brigantia, she was Boudica's original tribe before she married into the Iceni tribe. She was their patron goddess, and she sees this shrine to her that the Romans have turned into Minerva instead. And it's Romans, they didn't desecrate, they didn't consider desecrating the shrines. They didn't consider that desecration because they were afraid of the pagan god. Well, they were pagan. They were afraid of the Celts gods. So what they did was they tried to shift them supposedly nicely to, kind of gloss over them, dress them up as, except for Epona, the horse goddess. The Roman legions, the cavalries, actually adopted her as their goddess and took her back. She was worshipped as Epona instead of changing her name and changing all the stuff about her. But so it was difficult for me to wade through all this very, very misogynistic and inaccurate history. And so I took that, I read a bunch of that, of course, researched a bunch of that, and then I compared it to archaeological results and archaeological records, and they also were problematic because of men were writing them. And even though they were discovering so many tombs that had warrior women, Pictish and British warrior women, it was, oh, I'm sure that's just a fluke, or okay, so she was buried with a sword, but it had a jewel in it, so it was probably just jewelry, that type of thing. That's, we all know, just utter bullshit. And so I had to wade through all of that and then decide, okay, get into Boudica's head and create this warrior queen from all these different puzzle pieces and flip it with a matriarchal view. It
Wow.
was hard, but it was great. I love doing it. I started researching her in 2007.
Oh,
I was writing a book for Harlequin, their paranormal line, Nocturne, for veterans, right? We called ourselves ROM vets, romance writing veterans. 4 of us got together and wrote a book in a series. And we had to set a lot of it in the past. Our heroines were all military members, and they were all trying to find pieces of this amulet to put together to prove that the world had evolved enough to not be destroyed by these aliens who left these puzzle pieces. And I chose ancient Britain because I've always, I'm of Welsh descent. My family came over here in 1748 from Wales. Bowman Cast came over then. And so I know my ancestry is there. I've also spent a lot of time there. And my father and I read so many books together, and he introduced me to Boudica when I was a child. So I decided to set it there. And Boudica, the book is set during her armies on the move, but she's not really a character in the book. She's like a vaguely mentioned secondary character. But from that, I started research. I was obsessed with her, and I did more research, and I kept saying, I want to write a book about Boudica. I want to write a book about Boudica. And I finally had enough time to do like begin it. I had to restart it like 3 times, do several different versions of it until I found her voice and the right agent who also loved her and believed in her. And then we went to auction with it. And the amazing Rachel Kahn at William Morrow won that auction, and my heart at the same time. I love working with her. So that's how Boudica came into being.
That's quite the story. Almost as compelling as her own. I mean, outside of all the violence and
All the
bloodshed,
violence and such, yes.
tragedy, outside of all of that.
And there is really at her end, I chose a different ending that I will not give away here. It is more hopeful than many of her endings are. The truth is her body and her daughter's bodies, they were never found.
Right.
And the Romans have always purported that she had to have committed suicide and killed her daughters too, so that, because Boudica would not have been taken back to Rome in chains and paraded through,
Mm-hmm.
no, none of that would have gone on. So they believe that she must have killed herself because they never found her body. Well, I had a different idea for the end. So.
Well, I liked your different idea much better than
Same.
yeah, so so what has been the biggest surprise over the course of your career?
Probably the lives that a lot of my YA books have changed. I hear from a lot of young people, and how they say that, like House of Night, and then other books, My Tales of a New World, and a lot of the other ones have like got me through. It got me through high school. It made me know that there are other people who feel like I feel, and like House of Night was one of the first successful YA series that had positive representation. Not just for different ethnicities, but for LGBTQ positivity. And, I've heard from so many kids who are like, I saw myself in Damien. And I think that was a surprise for me because I was teaching. I taught high school for 15 years. I was teaching also while I was writing. And I knew I was making a difference in my classroom. And I'm from a whole family of teachers too. So I know about doing that. And I love doing that. I'm good at doing that.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I was giving that up when I had to retire from teaching in 2008. In 2008, I had to retire from, I was not retirement age in 2008. I'm not that old. Okay. But I had been teaching for 15 years. So I was vested, and I retired because House of Night blew up and I couldn't do both at the same time. and I felt the loss of my classroom very, very deeply. I love teaching. I love my classroom, and my kids. But what I started feeling as I was like touring and talking to like audiences, I realized that it was just a different version of my classroom. So that was a surprise. That was a surprise.
What a nice surprise.
It's a lovely surprise, and it still is a lovely surprise. It happens. I hear from people a lot, and I love hearing from readers. It always makes my heart feel so good to have someone say, you got me through a really hard time. Thank you for giving me this escape. Thank you for letting me know that it wasn't just me. So I will continue to do that.
Excellent. Well, as we wrap up this fantastic conversation, I could talk to you for hours more. What's one piece of advice you would give to new or aspiring writers?
My biggest piece of advice that I give to new writers is a piece of advice that Teresa Miller gave to me, that professor and the executive director of Oklahoma Poets and Writers Association. She is now retired though. Is that you must treat treat the career of being an author as you would any other career. Take off those rose-colored glasses and actually research. Know how a book gets from your head to the shelves of Barnes and Noble. And so many authors don't do that. So many nascent authors just are like, I'm going to write a book. And they just start writing, kind of like me with Nurse Janice, right? And they don't have a clue about the business. They don't know anything about agents, whether you should have one or not. And if you want to, I have strong feelings about that, but they don't know the process. They don't know why you would need an agent or why you wouldn't need an agent. They don't understand how a book actually is produced. They don't understand an editor's job. I have people who, I don't read unpublished work. It reminds me too much of teaching creative writing. And that was my least favorite part of teaching, was grading creative writing papers. Or not really grading, editing. I don't like it. But I like the teaching part, not that part. But they're always like, I just want to write this book and have my editor fix my grammar and punctuation. And I'm like, that's not what happens though. But don't editors fix it for you? No, they don't.
Right,
Sadly, that doesn't ever happen. They don't understand. So to be successful, if you want to be a career author, if you want to write for a living, first of all, have plan B, because supporting yourself with writing is very, very difficult. And there is a very small percentage of people who can actually do it. I can do it, but it took 7 years for me to do it.
Right.
And I wouldn't have been able to do it had the House of Night not taken off.
Right.
I was about matching my teacher's salary. So that was about enough to live on.
Right.
But, and then you need to, so have plan B, have your job, something that is consistently going to bring in money, because authors get paid in very, very strange ways. I mean, it's hard to count on royalties, how much you don't know how much you're going to get. I have gotten between $50 and up into the 7 figures as royalty checks. That is a large difference.
Right.
And it's hard to budget when that happens. So have plan B, and then know your career. Read everything, research how books get made, research the editorial process, what they do, what they don't do, what an agent does, what an agent doesn't do, and be wise about it. Take off those, you don't lay around on the couch in a pinafore and eat bonbons and drink champagne until the muse hits you. People will say, well, I have writer's block. I just can't write today. Okay, dude. Yeah. I used to teach teenagers. I did not want to teach them every day. Okay. But it was my job. So I got my ass up and I got dressed and I went in and I taught the children. And you know what? By the time I was in the middle of no, hour one or two, I'm like, you know what? I'm remembering why I love this. I can do this. Yeah. It's the same way with writing. You wake up and you're like, okay, I'm going to try to write. Oh my God, this is so hard. I don't know. I have writer's block. No, you don't. Just write. You just don't want to write because it's difficult and you came to a hard patch. So rethink what you're doing. Do you need to change a character? Do you need to outline more fully? Do you need to put that project aside and begin a whole new project? Something else. But what you don't need to do is sit there and say, oh, I have writer's block. Whatever am I going to do? Yeah, it's the same thing I did when I taught. You're going to get up and do your job. If you want writing to be your job, you have to do it whether you feel like it or not. And writing is rewriting. So if you write when you don't feel like it and it's garbage, go back and change it.
There you have it. Just
Right.
right. Thank you so much for your time today. I had such a wonderful time. And yeah, if you guys like fantasy and ancient Britain and showing the Romans what's what, go get a copy of
Strong women. Boudica was incredible. She was incredible. I think that women are going to love her.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
All right. This question is for JD and Kevin. How often do you think about the Roman Empire?
Oh,
Oh, all the time.
all the time. I'm thinking about it right now. So
That is the most hilarious meme I've ever seen.
I have seen some really hilarious responses to that on Twitter. Like, one guy just kind of, his wife asked him, and he's like, all the time. And then he went on this whole diatribe about, the parallels between the Roman Empire and the modern age. And yeah, it was impressive.
Yeah, I do think that Ryan Holiday contributed greatly to that with his Daily Stoic. I think
Yeah.
that that's probably where it came from, but I still find it hilarious. What was even funnier is their PR blurb, in the letter they send out, like, would you be interested in this title? They snuck that in there. And for people who find themselves thinking about the Roman Empire, which I thought was very funny.
Yeah.
But since, with historical context, I know we've talked about like writing historical figures or like dealing with that, but if you had to write a book in a specific like actual historical novel context, so sorry, Kevin, no tomb raiding in the actual setting, like
I've written scenes like that. Does that count?
no, like a whole book. If you had to write like a
Oh,
whole book, like is there like a
yeah.
time period or a figure or like a mythology that like would jump out at you?
I'd go to Egypt, like back when the pyramids were going up and the pharaohs
Yeah.
and all that. That could be fun.
Yeah.
I could see writing something about the early Celts. I could do that
Oh,
period, especially
interesting.
like Druidry and things like that. Because I write a lot about that anyway. So, and
Yeah.
Vikings. I write a lot about Vikings. So maybe I
Vikings
would do a
is
Viking.
very fun, violent, but fun.
Yeah.
That's
I'd
my
have
brain.
good Vikings. They're good, friendly, low key Vikings. Sane.
Oh,
Your friendly neighborhood Viking.
I think I would like to write about the ancient 80s. 'Cause
They-
nobody remembers that anymore.
Wow. No, Christine.
Yes.
Wait.
Technically, no matter what, if you're writing anything modern, if you write anything that's current, then it is technically historic fiction because, 5 minutes from now, it's the past, right? So
Right. Yeah,
there you
it
go.
is. I think it's just always very interesting, like especially this one where like she knew that Boudica was
Yeah.
a person, but there's not really a whole lot that history knows about her. Like nobody really knows what happened to her daughters. It's kind of interesting to take something and imagine what
There,
if?
Hmm.
there's a responsibility to that though, because this person really didn't have a whole lot out. Now all of a sudden there's this book that's going to become gospel on this person. If somebody
Yeah.
Right.
wants to learn something. So if she got something wrong, all of a sudden she's teaching the wrong thing. Um, I don't know if that's better or worse than not having anything at all out there, but yeah, I
Yeah.
guess you have to be responsible about it.
She did talk about that and hired, I think she said 2 historians for it. I know at least one assistants to help her do the research, which I think is kind of necessary. Like you would have to have someone fact checking, which I don't know. Do you think that would make it easier or harder to write,
Well, I
To
went through
have,
that to some extent with Dracul. Yeah, I mean, because there's people that have doctorate degrees in Dracula. Like you can actually
Yeah.
get that. So they came out of the woodwork when that book came out, and we ran it by a bunch of experts before we published it. The Stoker family ran it through a bunch of people they knew, just looking for anything like that that might trigger somebody and cause some kind of mass hysteria on the Dracula front.
uh,
Yeah, I think there would be like a lot of pressure. I don't know what that would do to my creativity though. I've been trying to think about that because, I
so
mean, it's
I
easy when
kind of
you're writing
wonder,
fiction. You just make it
yeah,
up.
but I kind of wonder though, like how important that is. Okay, so like I read The Secret Chord, Geraldine Brooks' book about King David. There's no way she knows any of the things that she wrote about, and that no one could know any of the details that she included in that story. She wrote in like homosexual relationships and other, there's all these things that she wrote in. What maybe that stuff's true, maybe it's not. It didn't matter though, because you know, we know enough about that character. She got that part right, the stuff that we know. The
Yeah.
rest, she had the sort of poetic license to do what she wanted and just told a good story. So
I think that
I
would
think,
probably be the way to do it. Write the story first and then fact check later.
yeah,
That's probably how I would write
you'd be
it.
surprised how often you get the facts right, though, but randomly. And I don't know what that phenomenon is, but it happens to me all the time with the archaeological thrillers. I'll write about some culture and I'll just make something up, and maybe I got a name wrong or something. But like, turns out there really is a god that they worshipped that is
Yeah.
the god of wheat or whatever, and it's surprisingly accurate. So I have readers reach out to me all the time, say, I didn't know anything about this, but after I read your book, I looked it up, and there it was.
Yeah.
I
Well,
do
I
like that
completely made that up.
aspect of like, I mean, all books can do that, but historical fiction particularly is sort of like a fun indulgence because I think it is kind of fun to like read something that isn't a textbook or like a
Yeah.
nonfiction book, and like have fun with it and then think like, oh, I wonder how much of that was true. Did this person really exist? Did they not? And that's always kind of a fun little rabbit hole to go down,
Hmm.
I think. I don't know.
I agree. I agree with you.
Great.
Yeah.
Do you guys believe in imposter syndrome?
I I I I didn't until I got here, and I'm feeling it right now. Uh, I absolutely suffer from imposter syndrome. No matter what I accomplish, there's always a voice in my head that's saying, you're fooling them. You're getting away with it. You know, always.
I take
How
medication
do
to
you,
shut that stuff down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, how
I
do you
should.
deal with it?
Well, JD takes medication.
Nausea, anxiety.
I don't deal with it. I just use it to write the next book. I try to prove myself wrong. That's what I try to do.
Yeah.
That's
Hmm.
healthy, right?
I
I'm in
I think it
competition with
actually
myself.
is.
Yeah.
As long
All
as
right.
you're not like going
Well, I'm
crazy
lying
with
about
it.
that. I'm a complete
Oh.
fraud when it comes to that. I don't do that at all. So,
Yeah. I don't know. It makes me harder on myself. It doesn't paralyze me. Like I know some people get paralyzed, but I get
yeah.
mad when I think I suck at something. So I don't know. In a way, it's kind of, I guess it's not all stress is bad stress. It can be good stress too. So if you're like,
No, yeah, I was
be
having a
good,
conversation with
be better.
Kara.
I
Uh,
don't know. But that's just
we
my brain. I'm probably a little neurotic. So I don't know that I
probably a little.
recommend that. It's probably not good for your heart.
Yeah. I was having a conversation with Kara before the show about some things, and a lot of this stuff kind of comes up because she knows I struggle with this. It overwhelms you and makes the writing harder, which is the part I'm trying to overcome. Like, why do I feel that way? I can look, I have a shelf full of books that I wrote, so I know that I can do it. And I have money in the bank that was earned from those books. So I know people are reading them. So yeah, why feel any of that? It's weird.
You know what I do? This is my trick, and I don't know if this is better or worse for anyone's mental health. I go to my favorite books on Goodreads and I filter to the 1-star reviews and I just read all the 1-star reviews of the books that I love.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
I don't know why, but it makes me feel better because
I like that idea. Yeah.
I'm like, oh yeah, see, like everyone's gonna have people who are like, this is the worst thing ever written. And I'm like, well, that person's clearly an idiot. And so then I'm like,
Yeah.
well, now obviously I can't listen to any of those people because what do they know? They don't know
Yeah. Well,
anything.
that's the likability thing, right? We always have this. I don't know, we want everyone to like us, or I do, but not everyone's gonna like you, and not everyone's gonna like your book. And if
Right,
everyone likes your book, you're not writing to anyone.
On
So you
that
right.
kind of
note,
have to get over that, right?
I
Like,
highly recommend the book "The Courage to Be Disliked," which I just read
yeah.
like a week
Mm,
or so ago.
okay.
It's weird. It's written as like a dialogue between a kid and a mentor, but it's very interesting.
I haven't
Also,
read
get
that
some of
book.
JD's drugs. That's the other
Mm,
thing
I
I
know JD's
recommend.
been holding out on us, I think.
The JD
No, I mean,
stands for just
I
deal.
just deal. I mean, that's kind of, I mean, I will literally, if I get that kind of feeling, I will pick up something that I've written before and read through it and kind of remind myself that I know what I'm doing. Been here, done that.
Interesting.
I used to have that kind of feeling like early on. I had it very heavily when I was trying to make the decision if I wanted to write my own book, like a book
Hmm.
under my own name, coming out of the ghostwriter thing, because it's real easy to hide as a ghostwriter. The second you slap your name on the cover, all of a sudden, the spotlights are on you.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that eats at you. But like, if you've accomplished anything in this world, just go back, review that, take stock and keep going.
I
Yeah.
haven't achieved anything and I still think I'm fantastic.
She has the confidence of one who has not achieved a thing.
I thought we just talked about your book club.
Oh,
Yeah.
right. Well,
Jeez, Jenna.
I know. Well, I added that N so that I didn't have it's my ghostwriter name.
Yeah, it's your pen
Yeah.
name. Another
It's
N
my
in the
pen name.
Jenna.
Jenna Bush Hager is my pen name. All right. Well, to wrap it up, what has been the biggest surprise of your career?
That I am not an imposter. No,
I
Mine
get
was when
surprised every
JD
time I
asked me
turn
to write
around.
Flatliners. I'm like, you want me to write another book with you? Okay. I guess I did all right the first time. That helped the imposter syndrome.
I'm constantly getting surprised. I don't know what's coming next, but I think that's partly what keeps all this fun.
Yeah.
yeah. I think I don't know if this qualifies, but like when I started writing, I thought I'm going to be a really great sci-fi writer, like the kind of, the guys that I used to love reading when I was growing up. And then I just took a dare to write a thriller, and then that changed the whole trajectory of my career. So that was, that wasn't like, everyone bursting out of a closet and yelling surprise, but it was different than what I was expecting. So, and
Very good.
pleasant. Like I discovered that I actually really love this genre, the thriller genre, and there's so much I can do with it that I thought I'd be able to do with sci-fi, but it turns out I don't have to fight people as much to tell them to read the thrillers as I did to read sci-fi, even though
Yeah,
it's like the
sci-fi is
same
a
story.
sci-fi is a strange genre. Like I feel like
Yeah.
it can be a little hard because you have like a lot of people who will go on there and
Yeah.
fact check everything that you do, right? Like even though it's science fiction, like they still want it sort of grounded in plausibility and they kind of want to
Yeah.
they don't want to experience. Whereas kind of with a thriller, like I mean, even though it's not set in like a fantastical world, you can still just like be completely unhinged and just like
Yeah.
do
I
whatever
got
you
Yeah.
I got
want.
news
Even
for
the
most of
fact
my
checking is
readers.
hilarious. So I'm going to throw my coworker under the bus because she read hats and she's like, you got something wrong in the psych report. And I'm like, I did. What? And she's like, you gave these two tests. I'm like, well, I do give those two tests because I'm a neuropsychologist. You probably
Right,
only give one because you're not. But we
right.
are like data insane. So I give both of those tests to have data correlation. She was like, oh, so like, I was like, come at me, come on, but that's okay.
Bring it.
I know.
Bring
Yeah.
it.
I saw there was an audiobook narrator who apparently reads for Sarah J. Maas, And she put on there, like she had this whole post with like a bunch of screenshots of people just constantly in her DMs telling her that she pronounced character names wrong or words wrong. And she's like, I have a 2-hour conversation with Sarah before every book is read. I have no, you're actually the one that's wrong. This is correct, which I just think is so fascinating.
Yeah. That's
I wouldn't even go down that rabbit hole of responding.
No.
Yeah, I know.
No.
Yeah.
Well, it's engagement, right?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I wouldn't have either, except she was sitting
That-
next to me. So that's the only reason I responded.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I guess it was like, how many books has Mass written at this point? Like 13, something like that. So I guess that fandom is nuts. So I don't know.
guess you have to be in the industry to kind of know how that works. But like they always ask if a narrator runs into a name or a word or whatever that they don't know how to pronounce, they will always come back and ask either your editor or the author or somebody, because they don't want that on their shoulders.
Right.
Because they get whacked with the same stuff, right? They get those same emails, the same responses.
My best experience with that was the guy who originally narrated Quelo Medallion is the one who told me it's pronounced Quelo instead of Coelho. And so I'm like, okay. And that's what it was from then on until I had it re-recorded under a contract with Spotify. And that guy just ignored all my notes and just went and did, so everything's wrong.
No.
Yeah. Yeah. Here's so last thing I'll throw in, by the way, is in relation to this, it's like if you have AI do the narration for things, I have an AI version of one of these, and it would sometimes forget like to pronounce the last letter of Kotler's name. So it'd be like his name was Cottle or whatever. It would leave off the R.
It's
And it would do that with
French-Canadian.
random words. Yeah. Exactly. So
Because my name French Canadian pronunciation is not Daigle. So
It's not?
No, it's Daigle.
Goggly.
But nobody can say that, so everyone says Daigle. So I'm like, cool. Yeah, we'll
What
go
is
with that. It's actually Daigle. It's French Canadian. But everyone says
right.
Daigle like
Sounds like
bagel.
you keep getting cut off.
I
That's
know,
what I was saying.
right? You don't.
Yeah.
pronounce
Sounds like
the
your
last
mic cut
letters.
out.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's closer to egg than bagel, but I like both breakfast foods, so I don't care. Like bagel is fine. You can rhyme with that. It's all good. So,
Well,
but
that's
now,
good.
no, it's been anglicized.
Well, you're the
so
one
it's
who
Daigle forever.
introduces yourself as Christine Daigle. So
Right,
I don't.
because nobody says it right, so it's Daigle, and I'm like, that's fine. And
French.
there are people in the U.S. who pronounce it that way, but that's not the French Canadian pronunciation. So, and I don't
I
really
wonder if-
care because it's not my
It's your
maiden
pen
name,
name.
so whatever.
Yeah.
When
Interesting.
Canada
It's your
becomes
pen
the
name.
51st state, are we still going to pronounce it as Daigle or?
Yes, it's always going to be Daigle. That's the U.S. pronunciation is Daigle. So
And her pen.
Oh.
Got it.
Next
Yeah.
episode, I'll tell you how you're supposed to pronounce Tumlinson.
yeah, but
That's
no,
next
it's
time.
it's wild because I'm a dual citizen, but my husband is U.S. but lives here now, so he'll try and pronounce the street names. He's like, Laurier. I'm like, no, it's Laurier. He's like, why do you not pronounce the R's? And I'm like, because it's French. I don't know what to tell you, but it drives him insane.
Yes.
enough.
The only thing the French
French.
ever got right was toast.
And on that note, JD, who is up next week?
Next week, we've got Jacob Kerr coming on. Jacob's a lawyer and communication executive working in the tech industry. He was also one of the first employees at Airbnb, which is a fun fact. He recently penned his debut novel, Dead Money. It's a twisty journey through Silicon Valley's dark side, wrapped in a stunning mystery. Jacob Kerr.
Sounds great. If you'd like to be notified as soon as new episodes publish, make sure you go to writersincpodcast.com and sign up now. We'll see you next episode and have a great week of writing.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Writers Inc. Access the show notes and leave a comment at writersincpodcast.com.